Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Appreciated to the sheikhs at IslamBradford to drop me in it and ask them for some medical advice with regards to fasting. This is the important bit because it's all related to the 5.5 hours in which we have to eat. The first thing I thought we'd mention is just something about what happens to the body during the fast, because people always say to you, how can that be healthy? You know, fasting up to 18 hours, how can that be beneficial to the Muslims? You know, what you're trying to do to yourself. I think the first thing we need to say that this is probably the best detox diet out there, because if you look at how the body interacts with food, if you take food in, any type of food, over 6 to 8 hours, the body will absorb all the nutrients from it, and then you will go into the hunger mode. When you start to go into the hunger mode, the body starts to break down the fat reserves, and they are fat reserves that build up around our liver and vital organs, and starts to convert that into energy, which keeps us going. And in those areas of fat, you have all your toxins, which are all the bad things that we've eaten that the body's absorbed, and they're stored in the body, and they lead to things like heart disease, cancer, and other things. So this is probably the best detoxification diet out there. All these other diets, they're nothing compared to this. There's too much medical literature out there that states that, you know, fasting, particularly the prolonged fasting where you do it like for a period of weeks, and in Ramadan you do it for a period of a month, but it is not sustained, as in you have periods at suhoor and iftar where you can eat. That's the best form of fasting out there. Obviously these fasts are very long. Some of us can remember when we did these as children, and now it's come back again full cycle. So obviously if we want to get the benefits out of the month, so we can concentrate when we're doing tarawih, salat, stay up, do qiyam, go through, have a productive day at work, we're going to have to take some general advice. I think the first advice that we should say is that the important bit about the fasting from the health perspective is what we do in between iftar and suhoor. Because if we, well, I'm going back to my childhood, it was pakore, samosa, jalebi, everything. I was driving down White Abbey Road today and I saw the Regal have already started putting up their pakora stand and this and that. The worst type of food that you can eat. The way we should open our fast is very beneficial. I mean, the Prophet ﷺ used to open it with dates. The reason behind that is that dates have a very quick release of energy. It's what's called a glycemic index. Some foods release food very quickly, some foods release energy very slowly. Dates, instant release, instant hit. So we open our fast with that, we get an instant lift with that. That should keep us going with some water through Maghrib to the important meal of iftar. Obviously, we need to have a balanced diet. You've got to be living in a cocoon if you don't think that, you know, the Muslims are fat. We're unhealthy myself, we're fat, we creak when we pray salat, when we go to sleep we snore, we can't even walk up these stairs in IslamBradford without getting out of breath. So we are, what type of soldiers of Allah are we? We're nothing, we're going to be defeated. You look on the streets and you go to some areas and you see the English people, the kuffar, you know, you can't just make generalizations, but they're running, they're jogging, they're watching what they're eating. To us, our addiction isn't alcohol, it isn't drugs, it's food. And I think as a lesson to myself, who is addicted to food, this month we can make that change. Not only can we detoxify our bodies from all the toxins we've stuffed into it over the past year, but inshallah we can make some positive, beneficial dietary changes that should last through the whole of the month, and then we can kick on for the rest of the year. So some simple advice, and I think the first thing when I was working in addiction unit in Halifax, where we're dealing with all the alcoholics and patients that are on heroin and crack, the first thing the psychologist used to say to them is everybody needs to understand their relationship to their addiction. So if we say, and we got to admit, we got to be honest, we overeat during the month of Ramadan, we've got to understand that relationship with food. We've got to understand what the bad things are that it does to us. We've got to understand the beneficial things about the relationship we should have with food and not to overdo it. So I think this should go back mainly to the brothers and the sisters when they're in the supermarkets doing the shopping. When you go shopping on an empty stomach, you will buy the whole of Tesco's and you'll take it home and you'll open it all, and iftar time, 10 minutes later you're stuffed. We do eat with our eyes, so we have to be careful with exactly what we prepare. We should tell the women folk and some of the brothers as well who like to prepare food to keep it short, simple portions that involve the whole of the food chain. Now we all know the fruit and vegetables, then you've got your protein which comes from meat, your carbohydrates which I'll come on to in a bit, then you've got your dairy products, and then you've got we do need fat and sugar in our diet, but it should be a very small proportion of it. So the first thing we should say is that when we are preparing the meal for iftar, we have to be careful with the exact amount of food that we put out. We waste a lot of food during the month of Ramadan. Wasting food is not within our religion, and it's something that we should not encourage by putting on big feasts. The only feast that we should have in Ramadan should be at the end, which is Eid. During Ramadan, we have to focus. We have to be focused. Just because if you hear the Maghrib Azan, it's a key for me to write. Let's sit down, pray Maghrib, and eat all the way through to Taraweeh Salat. You come to Taraweeh, and then it's a competition of who can belch the most and disturb. It's true. Who disturbs the understanding of Salat. Throughout Taraweeh, you're digesting your meal, thinking, I've eaten too much. You start feeling guilty. The classical things with addiction, you start to feel guilty. I've eaten too much. You've done the deed, the bad deed, which is overeat. Then you start to feel guilty. We're going to take ourselves away from hearing the beautiful sheikh from Egypt when he's doing recitation. And as we're walking down those stairs, that's when we'll feel right, we're ready to concentrate. The other thing that has been shown is that the human body, about day 4 or 5 of the fasting month, it releases endorphins, feel-good hormones. And so that's why the first 4 days can be very difficult, but when you get past that initial detox phase, and if you're doing it right, eating the right amount of foods, that's when you can do a whole year of fasting if it came to it. If it was prescribed that we had to do it, we'd do it because you hit the zone, and that's the important thing. A few important things. This thing, water, very important. You should be drinking, how much of these a day do you think on a normal day? 3 litres, 2.5 to 3 litres. The good thing about water is that if you have it before a meal, for example at iftari time, along with the dates, maybe a bit of honey as an instant release of energy, that will mean that when you come to eating your iftari meal, you will have less, because the water does have a tendency to prevent you overeating. And it goes back to the third argument: third food, third water, third air. Then you have to look at the type of foods that we're eating. If we want to lose weight in Ramadan, and some studies have shown that an average person, if they eat correctly, as in don't just make up for the 3 meals that they would have normally eaten, but maybe have 2 light, well-balanced meals, can lose 10% of their body weight. For me, 100 kilograms, I could get down to 90 kilograms in this month with eating sensibly, not starving myself. So that's a very important thing. A 10% drop in your body weight can reduce your blood pressure. So if you're suffering with blood pressure, it will reduce it by 10 points. So if your blood pressure is 150/70, you lose 10 kilograms. Each kilogram will lose you a point in your blood pressure. We know amongst the Pakistanis, and I know there are non-Pakistani and non-Indian brothers here and sisters, diabetes is on the increase. Every day I see brothers and sisters aged in their 40s, 30s that come with diabetes, purely due to the type of food we're eating, made worse by the type of food that we eat during Ramadan, which is all the unhealthy foods like samosa, fried stuff. They just release too much glucose and bad carbohydrates into our body, which causes our pancreas, where insulin is made, that's meant to break that down, to go into overdrive. We've only got one pancreas. If you're going to spank it all the time to get it to work like a horse, make more insulin to break down this glucose, you're going to run out of it. And that's why we're seeing Pakistanis, Bengalis, Indians from a younger age developing diabetes. So we're not looking after our bodies. So maybe this month we could make some changes. So water, this next week is very important. If you like coffee and tea, you should try to reduce the amount of caffeine you're taking in, because the worst thing that happens in the first Ramadan is what? Headaches. The first day of Ramadan is headaches, purely due to caffeine withdrawal. You're used to having 3 cups of tea or coffee throughout the day, and you go from that to nothing. So if you want to do it in a tailored fashion, is maybe this next week, try to reduce it so the first day of Ramadan is not very painful for you. So having the water, reducing the caffeine, We've got to move away, I'm afraid, from fried egg and parante at suhoor time, because it's not healthy. It's fatty, greasy, doesn't release the right amount of energy. Eggs good, but maybe if you want to add something like porridge, which is a slow release of carbohydrate, that's a slow release of energy to the body. So inshallah, maybe around about 10, 11 o'clock you start feeling hungry. And again, same thing is that iftar time is to just look at the type of foods we're eating. They're the main messages. The other messages, I suppose, are to, if brothers are suffering or if people are suffering with diabetes, this is the week that you need to go and see your doctor to get some advice on the medication, because you can, if you're on tablets, fast, but you will need to modify your medication, because you're only going to have a window of 5 hours in which to take medication. If anybody wants to come up afterwards and ask me specifically and they've got their prescription, I'd be willing to give them some advice, but really it should be through your own doctor who knows what level of control you are and whether you've had other problems. That is basically it. I think the main messages are, try not to do 3 solid meals in those 5 hours between Maghrib and Fajr. Definitely limit your portion control. One tip for that is to just eat a plate full of food, not a big plate, not a small plate, but a medium amount of plate, and make a mission not to overcook and overfill that plate. Third thing I would say is to definitely make sure that you hydrate with water, not tea or coffee, because that will lose more water from your body. Because as you well know, when you have a cup of tea, most people an hour or so later want to go to the toilet to empty out, and it takes all the good nutrients and water out of the body. So that's a negative thought as well. The other thing I would like to say is obviously to get the sleep at the right times. Doesn't mean that you sleep all the way through till the late Zohar, 3, 4, 5 o'clock, because you're not really getting much benefit out of it and your body's not used to it, so you will feel even worse. There are specific complications of fasting and eating, particularly eating too much, one of which is heartburn and indigestion, and that will be very common this Ramadan, because if you think about it, if you're going to eat at 9 o'clock, then you're going to come to Taraweeh, then you're going to eat again after Taraweeh, and you're going to go to bed. You know, in the space of 5 hours, you've had maybe 2 big meals. You're going to have a very uncomfortable sleep, which is going to affect your functioning throughout the day. That's about it, really. I mean, there's lots of healthy advice on the internet. If you go on the internet, you'll find lots of good things about the right types of foods to eat. But in a nutshell, you want to be moving away from refined foods. That's foods that, you know, they look pretty bland. You know, they're white, colourless. You go for more vegetables, more brown stuff like brown bread, brown rice. If you're having pasta, make sure it's cooked all the way through. Try to incorporate things like porridge oats into your suhoor, because that will give your body more energy throughout the day. And definitely try to make sure you have at least 5 equivalent 500ml bottles, 2.5 litres to 3 litres of water in that period, which will mean that you'll eat less, and inshallah it will mean that by the end of the month you would have detoxified your body. You would have a more spiritual month, because you'd be able to focus during Taraweeh Salat, etc. And more importantly, you may potentially lose 5 to 10% of your body weight, which most of us could probably do. Okay, any questions?
I know you said that you can go on the internet to look at what foods are good for you. You did mention porridge for suhoor. Can you recommend any evening sort of...
Yeah, ideally, the good thing about dates, and this is what scientists have only discovered when they invented this thing called the glycemic index, is that dates release energy very quickly. That's why we are encouraged, now we realise why we're encouraged to open our fast with dates. You take a date, straight away you get that energy. So for example, if brothers like to go to the gym, they should have a few dates before they go to the gym. I mean, not during Ramadan, but you know, in the other months, because it's a quick release of energy. If you want to know about the thing called glycemic index, you've got to look at foods that are unrefined. So you don't look at foods like white bread. You've got to go for brown bread that's still got all the husk and the stuff from the wheat in. That basically slows the release of it. Lentils, something we don't eat anymore, because gosht and chicken and all that we like. But dal is a very good source of energy. Rice, not the polished rice, but maybe using things like brown rice. The tilde type rice is good as well, because it's less on the scale. The balance is the meal should have a portion of vegetables, which are very good because they do contain the good carbohydrate, and they also give you fibre, which prevents constipation. But it should be less processed. Processed like, you know, these takeaways and frozen foods, etc. So natural foods. Food should have colour to it. If you have food like that, but even things like beans and lentils, good. Fruit is very good. Try to avoid fruit juices. Maybe as a pick you up straight away is good because it releases that energy. But throughout the, you know, in between, it's not very good to have that type of food. But if you go into Google and type in glycemic index or unrefined carbohydrates, it gives you a big list. For most people like us, it's going to be bran, so bran flakes, all bran, Weetabix, muesli, porridge, oats, easy to cook, pouch in the microwave, semi-skimmed milk, 2 minutes it's done, no thinking. Try to avoid things like sugary cereals at suhoor, because that's just going to give you an instant rush, 2 hours of glucose, and then you'll drop down again. Brown bread, eggs, that's a good suhoor. Iftar, you've got a little bit more to play with, but I think the important thing at iftar is portion control, which is what we should all be doing. It's all about that relationship you have with food. Why should we feel guilty after eating? You don't want to feel like that. But we all know when you stuff your face, you can't even do sujood properly. You get heartburn, indigestion, it slows you down on a big scale, so just avoid overeating. If you could do that, inshallah, if I could do it, I'll lose weight as well, 6 to 10 kilograms. It's doable.
So we should really weigh ourselves at the beginning?
I wouldn't make it, I wouldn't make it a, you know, but you know, as a little experiment, maybe you should do it, you know. But remember, this is just a month. If we can do it right this month, and you carry it through the year, you're definitely a winner.